Welcome back to the Bitcoin Brothers Australia podcast. It is good to be back. We have so much news for you tonight. And yes, there is no one with me at the moment, but we have our guest on the way. We'll do the news first and then we'll introduce our guest. We're very, very excited tonight for episode 12 of the Bitcoin Brothers Australia. So thank you so much for joining us. It has been a huge few weeks in Bitcoin. We've had a good kind of Easter holiday. We've had an Anzac holiday here in Melbourne, Australia. And it's been a few weeks since our last episode, but we're back and we have some huge news for you all. So the first one, which is very, very recent, very, very big. You probably would have seen it on X if you're on there or if you're following Bitcoin, but the Arizona Strategic Bitcoin Reserve has passed. That's right, it is official. So we've had our federal one, which beat all the states, and then we've had our states racing to see which one would pass first. And Arizona are the first state to pass everything through the House, through the Senate, through all the committees that had to be done. It's gone through all the rigorous debates. It's gone through everything, and it has passed. Almost. Yes, I say almost. So I tell you what, you learn so many things when you're studying the news of Bitcoin and you're looking around the world at everything that's happening. Here's how it works. Everything's passed, but now the governor has the power. So two things can happen. One, the governor can sign this into law. It's gone through all the things it needs to go through. It should get signed into law, but the governor has to sign it into law. So it is still, I think it's a 50-50 possibility now. So it's gone through everything. The governor is a Democrat, and this is a bill that has been brought in by Republicans. So it is not a guarantee, but all the things that it can go through, it has gone through. It is sitting on the governor's desk as we speak, and the governor has to decide, do I sign this into law or do I veto it? So she has the power to veto. We hope that she doesn't. We hope she does the right thing and the will of the people and the will of the politicians prevail. But we will find out very, very shortly because it has to be done within 5 days. It happened about 2 days ago. So possibly by the time you're listening to this podcast, we could know if we officially have our first state to pass a Bitcoin reserve, a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which would then be racing the Fed, which would be incredible for Bitcoin. Now, the actual bills themselves that have now been passed and should be law, they should become law very soon, allow the state treasurer and public funds, including retirement systems, to invest up to 10% of their capital in Bitcoin. So this state can use 10% of the funds from the state to buy Bitcoin. There was two strategic bills that passed. So the first one, that was 1025. The second one, which was 1373, created basically a digital asset strategic reserve managed by the state treasurer. So it permits the treasurer to lend digital asset to generate returns, to hold the digital assets otherwise. And this can be through, purchase. This can be through any Bitcoin that's seized, through other activities, anything like that. So one basically allows the state treasurer to buy Bitcoin with public funds, and then the other basically sends a strategic reserve to Arizona where they hold. They can lend against it, but they just build their reserve. So two bills that have passed, two bills that we hope will become law in the next few days. Now, as I said, Governor Hobbs, left side of politics. The bill was introduced by Republicans who are on the right side of politics. She has a history of vetoing. So that's the small concern, is that when Republicans have passed things through the House and through the Senate, she does have a history. There is a I don't know the exact percentage, but there is a fair percentage of her going, no, thank you. I actually am not going to allow that bill. Incredible power. So in Australia, just for those who are watching and maybe in Australia or outside, after a bill passes the House and the Senate, the Governor-General then signs off on it. And it's more of like a symbolic gesture, if you like. It never really gets vetoed. Like very, very, maybe once or twice in history might have it actually been vetoed. If it passes everything in the House and the Senate in Australia, well then that's the will of the politicians and the will of the people, and it gets signed into law. Fascinating to learn that, it can go through all these checks and balances here, and Governor Hobbs can actually still veto, even though it has gone through so much scrutiny. And it's obviously, such a good thing that is going to happen eventually anyway. But yeah, we hope that Governor Hobbs does the right thing here. And she doesn't say no. So an extraordinary amount of power that she has. Huge news, really, really, really bullish. Hopefully, in the next couple of days, you will see on our X feed, Josh Cram or Bitcoin Brothers Australia on X, that it has passed. We wait with bated breath. It'll be very interesting. Now, other news. A new Bitcoin company has been launched, very similar to Strategy. We speak about Strategy on every single episode. It's very exciting. Now, they bought more Bitcoin. We'll dive into that. But there is a new Bitcoin company. So this company is all about Bitcoin. It is Cantor Fitzgerald, Tether, Bitfinex, and SoftBank joining together to officially announce a company called 21 Capital. Now, this is a public entity focused on Bitcoin exposure, advocacy, media, and Bitcoin native financial products. Really, really big. There's so many aspects to this news. Basically, the new information here, so the other companies that we spoke about, we've spoken about Cantor before, we've spoken about Tether, Bitfinex we know about. SoftBank are the ones that have now come in. And if you kind of summarized all the news, this was really big news. And if you kind of summarized all of it, you could almost say that the new information here is that SoftBank have officially entered the Bitcoin market with an initial 900 million acquisition. So if you have a look at how much they're all putting into this one company, how much Bitcoin are they laying down? Well, SoftBank are joining and they're putting in $900 million to enter the Bitcoin market with this company. So SoftBank holds 180 billion in assets. They hold 32 billion in cash. They have a massive portfolio of companies. They have a really, really big say in heaps of companies around the world, including like Yahoo Japan, which I think they own. There's a few other things like that, but they are powerful and they are in the Bitcoin race. So it was really big news this week. 21 Capital is the one to look out for, and I'm sure we will hear much more about that on the news throughout our Bitcoin podcast episodes. So yeah, really, really excited, really bullish. Next in the news this week, we had VanEck confirming. So this was, I guess you could say, trusted journalists with more than one source, that China and Russia, so we actually spoke about them a little bit last time in terms of countries are going to start using Bitcoin. Well, it is official that they are. They're settling energy trades in Bitcoin. So this is really, really big news. And a lot of people think that this is the beginning of the de-dollarization. This is how, and we've spoken about with the BRICS countries as well, how do they get around relying on the US dollar? Well, Bitcoin is becoming the way that they're going to do that. So it's early. There's no question about it, but it's happening. So China and Russia have been settling some energy transactions in Bitcoin. And then Bolivia have announced plans to import electricity using crypto. And there's a French energy utility, EDF, who's exploring whether it can mine Bitcoin with surplus electricity currently exported to Germany. So these are the early signs, I guess, that Bitcoin is really becoming that permanent tool for countries to bypass the US dollar like we were talking about and we've spoken about before on the podcast. It reduces the exposure to US-led financial systems, but really, really interesting that you got two really big players. You got China and Russia, and they're like, hey, how can we settle some of these energy trades? Well, we're going to settle them in Bitcoin. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Have a look at Strategy. We spoke about Strategy before. Well, they have purchased another $1.42 billion in Bitcoin, which is over another 15,000 Bitcoin, which means as of April 30, 2025, they now hold over 553,000 Bitcoin, which is quite extraordinary. And I can tell you that their stock is rising, and it's rising quite dramatically. So it was roughly about $290 per share, which was a bit of a drop for it. And it got there probably a month and a half to 2 months ago now. And just steadily over the last month, it's back close to $400 a share, and it is climbing. And as Bitcoin climbs, it will continue to climb. And it's just incredible what he's been able to do. If you have a look at where Strategy was and where Strategy is now, to own over 550,000 Bitcoin and to have money to be buying more pretty incredible. So that was MicroStrategy that became Strategy. That's Michael Saylor, the CEO who runs that. And just one to keep an eye on for there. Now, we go across to Pakistan. Haven't made the news yet, Pakistan, with Bitcoin, but they have in the last couple of weeks. So can tell you now that Pakistan have announced plans to use its surplus electricity for Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. So the head of Pakistan's crypto council, Bilal bin Saqib, I'm going to say, and I apologize if I got that name wrong, but he announced that the country has held talks with several mining firms. The move aims to address challenges in Pakistan's energy sector, including high tariffs and surplus generation capacity, exacerbated by the rapid expansion of solar energy. The location of the mining centers will be determined based on regions with excess power. Now, the founder of Binance, he's going to serve as a strategic advisor to the Pakistan Crypto Council, really adding credibility to this initiative. So Pakistan planning to use their surplus electricity for Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. This goes back to a couple of things. One was, when US announce it to the world that they're on board with Bitcoin, other countries will follow. Well, we've seen that happening already. Pakistan are now jumping on board. And then you go back to the other discussions that people are having. AI, if they could choose one thing to settle in, what are they choosing? And you can probably go and look that up yourself. But if you're looking at AI and the future and what's happening with AI, what is AI going to be settling any kind of transactions in? Well, it's starting to become really obvious that it's going to be Bitcoin. So more really, really bullish news for Bitcoin. We move on to the Vanguard Growth Index Fund. Now, they have purchased 646,574 strategy shares. So MicroStrategy stocks, MSTR, they have purchased that for $200 million at an average price of $310 per share in Q1 of 2025. We just talked about the price of that and how it has already climbed to close to 400, sitting around that 380, 390 mark at the moment. So in the last month or two, I guess, they've just quietly gone about their business. They've seen what's happening. They've seen where this is going. And they have purchased 646,570 MicroStrategy shares this year so far, which is pretty incredible. Now, to finish off the news this week, we alluded to this a little bit, but the price of Bitcoin. We've done so many segments on the price of Bitcoin so far, and it's really been interesting to kind of get some messages outside of the podcast and discussions with people in real life, if you like. And the discussions have been that for some people, despite listening and looking through the history, that they have sold whatever they did buy into late last year when things were going well. And we spoke about the history of it. We spoke about the corrections. But if we have a look back, some of the things we spoke about on the podcast were the Bitcoin swings in history, even in really bullish years. So as an example, Bitcoin hit around $109,000 as its all-time high. And then last month, it dropped to $75,000. So there's quite almost a 30% correction, which was in the second week of April this year. Now, in terms of Aussie dollars, we've spoken on this show, it hit 170, 175, and then Aussie dollars, it dropped back to about 120. So quite a correction if you're holding any kind of significant wealth or your net worth in Bitcoin, then quite a correction and can be hard to look at. But we spoke about how this drop is very normal, and then historically, when it's had huge increases over the year, it's had parts in the year where it does have these drops and it has these large corrections. But for the first time, many of our listeners have actually had to live through this, and I guess all the euphoria from the start of this year and the end of last year to live it through a correction. Well, I would say that the worst of that drop is definitely behind us. And in the last 2 weeks, Bitcoin has climbed back over $95,000, climbing up around that thousand Australian dollars. So it's a rise of, 20,000 US dollars, 30,000 Australian dollars in the last couple of weeks. So I'd say to you, well done if you held, if you had the conviction, if you did the work, because there are bigger and better things to come this year. So there's very little doubt you will continue to reap the rewards this year, but it's just been fascinating as we go through the news and we have a look at the price of Bitcoin that over the last 2 weeks, it has kind of gone to that big dip. It's hit that bottom and now it is climbing back up. So well done if you did hold, because there are people, unfortunately, that didn't. So definitely very, very well done to everyone who did. Now, that is the news. Very, very exciting. We're very lucky and grateful as well that we've got a guest who is in the studio tonight. So we're going to welcome him in, and we'll take a quick little break, and then we'll be right back with Mike for the second part of the Bitcoin Brothers Australia. All right, welcome back to the Bitcoin Brothers Australia. We are part 2 tonight, and we have our guest. Now, I have to say that our guest tonight was actually his idea, where he said, look, Josh, you should just do the news by yourself because it is quicker, it flows better. And so I said, all right, thanks, mate. Well, you come on. I'll have a crack at doing the news by myself. And then we'll jump in with you. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah. No, I thought you were a natural at the news, so it should just be your segment, I reckon.
No, look, we appreciate that. So Mike is a man that has known about Bitcoin for way longer than me. So I'm gonna estimate. He's told me roughly about 2016, 2017. He might have had a think about that since we spoke last, but that's when he knew about Bitcoin and started buying some Bitcoin, which is very exciting. So we won't ask him if he's still held on to that through all these years or not, but he was very early in Bitcoin, so very well done. He's married. He's very involved and very good at youth work, I would say. Seeing that firsthand as well, and he's helped a lot of young people. He's recently got into the property market, I think we can say that, and as I said, is a Bitcoin owner from 2016 or 2017. So, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
That's pretty crazy. Mate, thanks so much for coming on. His name is Mike Finger, and he joins us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think you can tell probably by my demeanor whether or not I kept that Bitcoin from 2017.
So it was 2017, was it?
Yeah, 2017. I remember coming back from, it was actually sort of a summer youth work program, and we went to this party, and all of a sudden everyone had their crypto, whatever the crypto account was, Coinbase or something like that. And everyone was talking about it because it had just spiked. And I was like, what is this? And everyone was talking about how they just made all this money. And I was like, oh, I should get on this. I should get on this now. And just bought, I think I put in about $300, which at the time was a fair bit of my money.
Yeah.
Bought at the peak. And then things dipped soon after 2017 and into a bit of a trough. And just panic dumped it. Should have hung on, but yeah. So have known about it for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny because we've actually we've kind of dug deep into some of the halving years and the years after the halving, and 2017 was one of those. And from memory, it was like at a point near the start of 2017, it was like $1,000 a Bitcoin. It got up to as a big deal. And then it kind of dipped. And then by the end of 2017, it was like $20,000 a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it was like this huge year in Bitcoin. So it must have been like, you would have been, I don't know, there must have been a lot of people like, wow, look at this thing go.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like so many people have that story of getting in at a point and then just cashing out at the wrong time.
Yeah. Or a story where people told them to buy. We've had a few people on this show where it was like, people said, hey, you got to buy Bitcoin when it was sitting like, $5,000. And they kind of look back and they're like, how did I not buy any?
Yeah.
Why didn't I just buy some?
Yep.
So it's
true.
It's very interesting, very interesting. Mate, tell us about your journey. So I guess start us off. I mentioned a little bit of youth work, but what do you do with yourself? What did you learn about money growing up? Who are the influences? Do you invest?
Yeah, I mean, great questions. I remember looking at that question, what did you sort of learn about money growing up? And the reality probably was not much. I think The Barefoot Investor was a book that was pushed into my hands at an early age. And growing up, we sort of had that system even from a young age of having sort of 3 buckets, something for giving, something for spending, something for saving. And that was sort of a system that I grew up with. and then worked pretty in line with the barefoot investors sort of theory of having these buckets that you divide your money up into. And so that was probably all I really did. And then I only really started seriously saving, probably to save up for an engagement ring, really. When I was a single man, it was just paycheck to paycheck and making it work. And then it was going, okay, how to adult this now. And simple stuff like, cutting out things that you can and not overspending and, making sure that you're slowly building up a small amount of money for saving. And then, that probably led to the decision, to buy a house even came out of wanting a family, not even out of wanting a house or wanting to have more money. It was, okay, well, if we're going to have a family, maybe having a child would make this other dream of ours harder. So let's think about how we might be able to get into the property market first before trying to start a family. And we're fortunate to have some help from rallies and save up a bit and just the right opportunity. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So were your parents good with money growing up?
Yeah, both my folks were teachers. And so it never felt like we had a lot of money, but we always had time. So I think, a lot of people want money so they can have more free time. And being both teachers, school holidays would come around and you'd go away for 2 weeks and you could kind of live it up in the caravan and trek around. So it always felt like we were doing well. Although, on the large scheme of things, it was probably quite modest salaries, but they were smart with their money.
Yeah. Did they ever talk to you about investing, or did they invest? Or
no, never. And that's probably one thing that I was a bit salty about. Even at high school, investing was never really mentioned. It was sort of how to do your tax return. That was something that they get you to do, and how to pay for things like bills with your salary, but never investing. That probably came later through friends who'd sort of taken a bit of a leap into that world and slowly learning bits of information from them. A little bit like buying a house. I had no idea how to buy a house. You start reading lots of things, talking to lots of people, and then you learn sort of, the how-tos of sort of bigger money, it almost seems like, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. That's awesome. And then tell us, what do you know about Bitcoin?
Wow. Seriously, not a lot. And so I was even feeling a bit sheepish coming on when you asked me if I'd come on. I know we had a bit of a discussion the other day in the car about Bitcoin, and it was really just me firing my skeptical questions at you and you having these answers and me going, oh, okay, interesting. But really not a whole lot of information as much as I had some Bitcoin. I didn't really understand. Which is probably the reason why I cashed out.
Panic sell. We actually did a segment like "Don't panic sell, panic buy" when it was really dipping. Yeah. So it's kind of funny you came on and said, I panic dumped almost. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And no, very little. And I think that's probably been one of the barriers of engaging with cryptocurrencies. Has just been, don't understand. So from what you do know, from what you have looked into, what would you find interesting about it or positive about it, or what would spark your interest to be asking questions? And well, I mean, conversations with you have probably sparked my interest, and particularly some of the stuff that's happening around the world right now with, things that I assume to be quite solid, smart institutions buying Bitcoin and going, oh, well, hang on, if this Reserve Bank or if this, government are starting to buy Bitcoin, then there's probably something in this. And so that's where it piqued my interest a little bit more broadly and wanted to dig a bit deeper. Yeah, nice. Was there anything from the news today that you that stood out? You made me do the news segment by myself. Yeah. Was there anything where you thought I could have jumped in there actually? Yeah, well, the one thing I found fascinating was your comment about Russia sort of buying and selling now through Bitcoin, just sort of as a bit of a get around. Yeah, the transactions with China. Yeah, energy transactions. Yeah, I found that super interesting. Sort of on the world stage, where the US can kind of put handcuffs on particular nations and the way that they trade. Then for other nations just to go, well, stuff you, we're gonna go do it with Bitcoin. So what are you gonna do about it? Like, I just find that so so wild that is now happening, especially with tariffs now, that Trump's tariffs, that so many other countries no doubt will follow suit in starting to trade with Bitcoin because it's going to be better for them. Yeah, that's so true. So interesting. And then what about so you've obviously your positives, interests. What would be like if you you're talking to me, what would be like the hesitation knowing what you know now? Why would you not then right now? What would be stopping you being like, you know what, I need to put like at least 10% of my net worth or whatever percentage. Like, why would I? Like, what would be holding you back?
Yeah, I think probably two main points that sort of stop me from doing it. One of them would be sort of that idea. The not the pyramid scheme, but the Ponzi scheme almost aspect of it, where I'm hoping that if I buy some, then I really want other people to buy some, so that my worth in it goes up.
Yeah.
And the same thing with sort of people in my circle of influence that are telling me, oh, have you thought about buying some Bitcoin? Hey, I think you should buy some Bitcoin. It's like, well, if it's such a good investment, then why wouldn't you want it all for yourself, sort of a thing. And the sense of it's only valuable if more people keep buying it.
Yeah.
And so I think that gives me a bit of hesitation in that as soon as I was to buy some, I would be encouraging other people to buy some, because if they do, then it's going to mean mine goes up in value. And so that whole idea of that it's only as valuable as the amount of people that buy it sort of screws with me a little bit mentally.
Yeah. That's interesting. So there's two things that I thought of there. One was episode 2. We spoke about a big focus on, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? So actually dived into that. So go back if you're not sure about if that kind of, you're like, oh, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? Go back and have a look at episode 2, and then definitely send us messages on the show for any of our listeners out there, and we'll go back into that for sure. The second thing was interesting. Michael Saylor spoke about that a few times. So he's the guy that owns Strategy. He's just buying as much Bitcoin as he can. But he did say at the start, he's like, look, at the start of the Bitcoin journey, basically, Bitcoin's either going to, you could start it off as $10,000, but then it gets there. $100,000 when it gets there. Or $1 million. Bitcoin or it's going to zero. There's no real in between now of it's either going to $1 million and plus, or it's going to zero. But when you have a look at, the news, what it's being used for, we always talk about the properties of the thing. So it's yes, if I buy Bitcoin, obviously, if every single other person in the world then sells it and doesn't want it anymore, then my Bitcoin would become useless for sure. But when you look at the properties of Bitcoin, that it's fixed supply, it's easily transportable. I can use it for payments with Russia to get around US sanctions with China, and then you look at it's almost like that risk factor. It's almost too far gone now, where you've got millions of miners around the world. You've got billions of dollars. So this is the other interesting thing, because I had a discussion about this with someone the other day, and they were saying, oh, you're only doing this podcast, or you're only doing this because you want other people to buy Bitcoin, right? Because it's better for you if other people buy Bitcoin. I was like, well, it's not actually better for me if other people buy Bitcoin, because on the scale of the number of people that actually listen or watch this podcast, if every single one of them bought Bitcoin, it would do nothing to the price.
Yeah.
This is not for me. It actually doesn't affect me at all what you do, because there are billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin traded every day. Every day, billions of dollars worth. You can have a look on chain. It's all transparent and open. So, no one that I know is going to be buying billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to actually affect the price and affect what I do. What's going to affect what happens with Bitcoin is going to be companies, countries, and then the way that people almost need to use it because of inflation, because it's it's a deflationary thing, because it helps your purchasing power rather than saving in fiat money and losing your purchasing power. So there's all these other things where it's it's fascinating to hear you kind of say those things, because it goes back to that, okay, well, yeah, because I kind of had the same questions, the same, because I don't want to be, promoting a Ponzi scheme. I don't want to be am I being passionate about something that's dodgy Ponzi scheme or something? But then, the more I look into it, it's oh no, it's all these other awesome things. And then, your friends and family and listeners go oh yeah, I'm going to look into this because of this. That's great. I think they're going to reap rewards for that. I really think they're going to reap some great rewards for that.
But actually, on that, I found that I was reading some of the show notes, and towards the end, I found that really fascinating. I know we've probably got it here, talking about sort of some of that big picture. When I think you're talking about Strategy. Yeah. How they continue to buy Bitcoin at such huge volumes that it's effectively it's halving like double the speed of
Yeah.
what it should be.
Yeah.
And so what that means for, your everyday punter trying to buy Bitcoin of what is currently available daily is dwindling. And made me think of, and even across the world, these big corporations and companies buying up big, and what that means for, the little guy that has a bit of Bitcoin and sort of going, well, if it's ultimately, it is controlled by those that have poured billions, millions of dollars into it. And then hoping that, obviously none of them will ever sell, because if one of them did, that owns such a large piece of this pie, then, it would plummet for the everyday person who is affected by those that have so much.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good point too. I guess that's where it probably comes down to growth adoption as well. Like we looked at in terms of not only big companies, but then retail. So we looked at a few weeks ago, like Bitcoin adoption compared to the internet adoption. And it was so from, the mid 1990s, early 1990s, when the internet started to people were like, oh, this might be a thing, to the back end of 1999 and early 2000s when it was this big boom. But Bitcoin, if you look at for the starting phase compared to the starting phase of the internet, the growth adoption rate of Bitcoin is greater than the internet adoption. So that's where it's
it's pretty wild.
It's really interesting. So it's the companies and governments jumping on board now probably spikes the price up earlier than it would have done for sure. But the growth adoption rate, when the more that people learn about it, and the more that they actually look into the intrinsic values of Bitcoin, and people are like, oh yeah, I probably need to have some of this. And that adoption rate alone is greater than just the number of people using Bitcoin is greater than the number of people using the internet at the same stage of their life cycles.
Yeah.
So that's where, because these are great questions. These are really good questions that I kind of wrestled with, a year ago. So it's fascinating to hear you, have those same kind of things. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to come across as skeptic either. I think it's easy when you know little to be skeptical.
No, it's good. I think it's great because one of the things I said too is I feel like Bitcoiners question things.
Yeah.
Right. Like people that are Bitcoiners are people that really question things and look into things, and I've seen that in a number of different ways with a number of different things. I was speaking about even the idea of they did a survey. It was most Bitcoin it was a religious survey for Bitcoiners. Basically, it was what do you believe? It was are you Christian? Are you Muslim? Are you atheist? Are you agnostic? What are you? And it was the larger percentage of Bitcoiners were Christian.
Yeah, wow.
I think I spoke about it in episode 5 maybe. But I was like, why is that? It was
that's fascinating.
Yeah, but I feel like it's because they question things more. It's they're not they're oh, hang on, was the world really just created out of nothing, just a random chance of events? It's when you look into it, you're like, oh no, it wasn't.
I mean, I don't know what to think of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that they're curious.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? But I found it fascinating. Definitely found it fascinating. Mate, we're going to move on to... I got a shout out this week from a guy. So this is a shout out to him. So this is for Blake Kirkham. Thanks so much for your message this week. And he was listening and he said that he loved the show, and we certainly love the messages from everyone. And if everyone's got questions and things, certainly feel free to message me directly as Blake did, or message the podcast or on X or Instagram or whatever you follow us on. But he wanted to know why no Australian politician is speaking about Bitcoin. So he said, in the US, it was actually such a big kind of thing. And this was really interesting reflecting on his question to me because, Trump actually came out at a huge Bitcoin conference 6 months before the election. And he said, hey, if you elect me, I'm going to make a Bitcoin strategic reserve. I'm going to make it safe for you guys to custody Bitcoin. I'm going to fire Gary Gensler. I'm going to do all these things which are really positive for the free market and positive for Bitcoiners and cryptocurrency. He came out and was really strong about that. And there's no doubt, in a close election, he pulled a lot of people that wouldn't have voted for him. And then they did vote for him. And it potentially had an impact on a US election.
For sure.
Fascinating that, no one in Australia there's no main politician, right? I mean, obviously we got, Peter Dutton or Anthony Albanese. One of them is going to be the Prime Minister. Fascinating that no discussion at all about cryptocurrency, about I feel like why do you reckon that is?
Well, I don't even know if they've been asked to question it. Even in the debates of I don't think any journos even asked them a question about cryptos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question as well. And I remember thinking that there was some slight. I remember reading that the coalition maybe was slightly more favourable to Bitcoin than the Labor Party, but then there was sort of a sub comment which was like, well, they're both actually pretty rubbish. Like they haven't really presented much at all.
Yeah.
But I don't know because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it said something like 3.9 billion people in Australia own at least some Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, someone told me before that it was like 1 in 5 Australians
Yeah.
now own some kind of crypto or Bitcoin.
Yeah, and so I remember,
1 in 5.
which is a lot,
That's
enough to sway voters. You would think.
Points in an election.
And so I found it fascinating knowing that, and knowing that collective group of people who own at least some Bitcoin would vote. Well, that would definitely sway me
Yeah.
to vote for a
100%.
candidate, especially in this climate where you're going splitting hairs on some stuff.
Yeah.
One really presenting hard on Bitcoin. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure why.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about this too. I was wondering if it's like the risk factor, because I feel like in Australia, we're always that one step behind what's happening in the US. Like we always tend to follow them or follow someone else, you know what I mean? And then Trump's such a divisive figure. So it's like he's leading the way on this. If I as an Australian politician jump in and say, hey, you know what, we're going to be really strong. We're going to be like helpful for Bitcoin, for crypto, for the free market, for all these things. We're going to kind of follow Trump's lead and example. If people will go then like, oh no, he's following Trump, not voting for him. Like I wonder if there's that fear factor of that, or just the fear factor of like, hey, like, yeah, we're really strong for Bitcoin. We believe in it. We've researched it. We think it's going to be great for the Australian people. Like we're going to, have policies that really protect Australians and their Bitcoins. And then Bitcoin tanks or something.
Yeah.
Like, a couple of weeks before the election, it has a 30% drop. And everyone's like,
Yeah, maybe it's too risky to add it into the campaign trail.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. Well, I have some doubt. I was going to say I have no doubt that it'll be involved in the next election. I think where there's just that sense of
100%.
lagging behind the world stage with many things. So I think depending on sort of how the world goes over the next 3 years, I have no doubt there'll be a policy at the next election.
Yeah. But I mean, even it's interesting because so Peter Dutton's like this huge outsider now, right? So I think Anthony Albanese was like this hot favorite. And I don't even know. I saw like on X, someone said like it was like $7, a $7 chance for like Peter Dutton to win or something. Like they were just saying it was like it's so outside chance now that he's going to win. It's like what a great Hail Mary.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, come in like a couple of days
silver
before.
bullet.
It's like, hey guys, you know what? We're gonna
take a real hard stance on Bitcoin.
We're gonna make an Australian Bitcoin strategic reserve.
That would be great.
Imagine that would throw chaos everywhere. It'd be
yes,
that'd be so good.
Should tweet him.
Yeah,
X him, whatever it's called.
I actually did mention though last time too. There is the Libertarian Party who so obviously they're never going to get enough votes to actually win government, but that was the first party that were like, hey, and they're in Australia, and they were like, hey, we're going to buy Bitcoin, we're going to make good things for Bitcoin. So there was a very small minor party that did come out and say it, but none of the major parties are talking about it. So it's very interesting. Mike, something you learned this week. We love this segment.
Well, I've actually got two. One of them is not so much a learned, but in some of my perusing of the podcast, something that I learned was there's a favourite word used in your podcast.
Oh, no.
Do you know what it is?
I don't know.
and viewers or listeners will know this. The word bullish.
Oh,
the word bullish just gets a real run on this podcast.
It's because we're very positive. Do you know what's really funny about you saying that? So we were in Adelaide for the AFL gather round.
Yeah.
And I got interviewed by Mitch Cleary on Channel 7 News. And I said bullish in the interview. And Georgia was next to me with the kids. And she started laughing. And it was brilliant. And it was such a funny time. But yeah, literally because I so much time into Bitcoin and so passionate about Bitcoin, positive.
Yeah.
I just used it by accident. And I used it talking about the Saints on Channel 7 News with Mitch Cleary.
So good.
That was very funny. I love that.
Now, the other thing I learned was not super on theme at all to Bitcoin in the conversation we're having. We were in Japan 2 weeks ago. And whilst I was over there, I was doing a bit of a history dive on YouTube and sussing out different places we're going to. And I learned that ninjas, one, they were legit, but also that they actually weren't that that good in terms of like they weren't super skilled assassins that they get painted as in Hollywood. They were actually more just sort of into intelligence gathering and sort of espionage, as opposed to like always going in with ninja stars and stuff. And that they were sort of a rank below the samurai. And I'd always had this image that they were the big deal.
Top dogs.
Yeah.
You want something done, you get the ninjas.
But they're just kind of like spies that infiltrate and gather intelligence. There you go.
Well, there you go. The ninjas. Very interesting.
Fun fact.
No, that is a fun fact. That is a very fun fact. Something I learned this week, Mike, you mentioned it earlier. This idea of a synthetic halving in Bitcoin. So I was fascinated by this. So Bitcoin has a cycle. And we talked about this cycle of every 4 years. And early on in the podcast, we said with these cycles, like if you buy Bitcoin, don't get sucked in when it drops. You know, don't get too excited when it goes up.
Thanks, mate.
Because well, don't get too excited when it goes up because it's got a lot further to go. That's what I would always say. But a short-term hold is 4 years, right? That's what we kind of spoke about. Like a short-term hold in Bitcoin is 4 years. You know, your medium hold is your 10 years, and probably the right time to hold is for as long as possible, which is longer than that, right? That's like that's the cycle so far. And historically, you know, we spoke about like there's no 4-year period where you held Bitcoin where you wouldn't be in profit, right? And it's outperformed every other asset. Like we look at all these things, and like it's pretty incredible. And a lot of that is to do with the halving. So every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that you can mine per day gets halved. So the reward for the miners gets halved, which makes the supply less so that the demand's still there and the demand's growing. We spoke about the adoption rate, you know, compared to the internet, which means the price goes up, right? So it's like there's less Bitcoin every 4 years. And because of that, a 4-year cycle is really important. There's this synthetic halving going on that has happened and started happening since 2020, and particularly in the last year, which was fascinating. So someone pointed this out, and I was like, this is really, really interesting. So after the 2024 halving, miners are producing 450 Bitcoin per day. So that's what can be, I guess, bought, if you like. If all the Bitcoin on all the exchanges was purchased and there was none left, well, then there would still be 450 Bitcoin that would become available each day because that's what's left in the supply. So that's about 13,500 new Bitcoin per month, which enter the global economy. Strategy.
Can I ask you a dumb question on that? Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Is none of that rolls over? Like if it doesn't all get mined, or it always gets mined every day?
It always gets mined.
It always gets mined.
It's
never not been mined.
It's never not mined.
Right.
Yeah. Good
Sorry,
question. No, that's a good question. Really good question. So MicroStrategy, raising billions through ATM and convertible notes, have been aggressively outbidding the market for fresh coins. Every month, every quarter, they absorb this huge percentage of the total new supply. So, you know, they're consistently buying like 30, 40, 50% of all Bitcoin, which means that they're actually creating this synthetic halving. They're cutting the available supply in half ahead of the schedule. Like it's not meant to be cut in half for 4 years, but they're doing it like every week.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that it's like, you know, this is a synthetic halving, not by like protocol, not by design when it was created 15, 16 years ago, but simply now by acquisition from this company that have seen the light, if you like.
Would that be likely to even more, into even more than half as you know, strategy gets more?
Well, one thing that this person who was talking about this synthetic halving, and I was like, oh wow, one thing they didn't mention was that the ETFs are buying almost just as much.
Wow.
Per year. Like it was the first year of ETFs last year, and they bought, you know, I think BlackRock holds like 600,000 Bitcoin or something close to strategy. Like it's pretty close, 500, 600,000.
Sure.
So like in 1 year, these ETFs just hold heaps and heaps and heaps. So it's a simple equation now. The real Bitcoin supply is you got your newly mined coins, take away the MicroStrategy quarterly absorption, right? And then also take away the ETFs now that are buying stacks. BlackRock bought about 3 days ago over 10,000 Bitcoin in 1 day. So, I mean, if you do the maths on that, right now we're sitting roughly around 95,000 US dollars per Bitcoin. 10,000 Bitcoin, 10,000 times 95,000. Doesn't work on my iPhone. There's too many zeros. It doesn't allow you to. That's how much in one day they've spent on Bitcoin. So yeah, I just found that fascinating. There is a synthetic halving going on. It's not every 4 years. It's every time that Michael Saylor buys Bitcoin, basically. And you might think this is crazy, but we have a look at like specific figures from the last 6 months. So Strategy has accumulated 379,800 Bitcoin in the last 182 days. So what does that mean? That means it's about 2,087 Bitcoin per day over the last 182 days. We know that there's only 450 Bitcoin mined per day at the moment. Now, it's just
so. Hang on, you're saying that they're acquiring more Bitcoin per day than is available to miners to mine.
Correct. Yeah, by a long way. So because of like there's probably there was close to 2 million Bitcoin left on exchanges overall.
Right.
So that's how much is left for everyone that...
Sort of from other people who've sold it historically.
Yes, that's been mined. And
yes.
Yep, that's right, yeah. So,
wow.
Crazy. So I just thought, I was like, wow, synthetic halving. That is like, very, very interesting. And it probably, again, it's like we spoke about earlier, but it's like, it's almost like artificially increasing the price way ahead of time, way ahead of design, way ahead of what anyone else would have imagined when they looked at Bitcoin. It's like, it'll probably take a lot longer to get to $100,000 US a Bitcoin.
That's very interesting.
Like, oh no, it's happening a lot quicker because this synthetic halving that's going on. Fascinating. Tweets of the week. So this was there's a couple here which I found very interesting. This one was by Michael Saylor as well, so it ties perfectly in. We talk about him a lot. We always say that. But he said, when banks finally bless Bitcoin and all the experts agree it's a good idea, everyone will want to buy it, no one will need to sell it, and you won't be able to afford it. That was like a little boss mic drop. Mic drop tweet.
I mean, very bullish from him, some might say.
He is the most bullish out of anyone, definitely. Now, we've spoken a lot about on this podcast, inflation and purchasing power, and how Bitcoin is the answer to that. And I feel like a lot of people are seeing that. This was by Tyler Green, and I thought this kind of summed up a lot of the things we spoke about on the podcast. So he said, the boss at work, congratulations, gives you a 5% pay rise. Well done, Nice. How good. Beautiful. But, the RBA prints 7% more Australian dollars, right? So what that means is, congratulations, you went into work and got a 5% pay rise, but in real life, in your purchasing power ability, you just got a 2% pay cut. And that is because of the amount of money that the Australian government is printing. The world's supply of money, like the money in the total global economy, has gone up 80% in the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
That's why cost of living is so high and so hard for so many people, is because governments don't stop printing money. And the Australian government has been one of the worst in the last year. Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is literally fact that you can go and look up. And this is how fiat currency steals from the working class every single day. Which is why this guy's like, hey, everyone, you need to vote for the Libertarian Party and support Bitcoin in Australia.
So this was his little plug for.
There
was
funny.
some in there.
The back of the tweet. I tell you, I saw the start of this tweet and I was like, that's a really good, that's a really interesting, the inflation stuff. And I didn't actually see the back of the back of the tweet. So that's kind of funny that jumped in there as well. That's really good. Mate, do you have any other questions about Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, some off the back of even that what you're talking about there about strategy buying, that synthetic halving, and especially some of those other ETFs buying big. Question being around, well then, okay, so if cryptos, let's say, I mean, they are volatile to a degree in that they can go up and down very drastically. Sure, you hold them over 4 years. Historically, it would say that you would do well. But then why not just invest in ETFs or MicroStrategy or big companies that are buying lots of Bitcoin? Because then at the end of the day, if they, let's say Bitcoin takes a massive dive, you would lose less than if you'd put that money in Bitcoin because that company still exists when your Bitcoin doesn't. So do you think more people will actually start investing in these companies that are just buying big on Bitcoin instead of Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question and a complex one. Really, really good. So I've said this to a few people. If you are someone that would struggle to buy Bitcoin because you've got to go on an exchange and then you're worried about self-custodying it and things like that, it's not a terrible idea to like, I understand Bitcoin and I understand how it works. I've looked into Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, made my own decision on him, like that he's who he says he is, and he's going to hold Bitcoin and not going to sell it. And if you could make those decisions then, and you'd be happy with that, then I think investing in companies like MicroStrategy is like a given. And it's also for people that like want to, exactly like you said, go through the normal financial channels and institutions rather than, like being on a crypto exchange and buying Bitcoin directly. So it's funny. There's always the risk of, so Bitcoin, there's no one in control, and there's no one that like, a lot of crypto, there is someone in control, and we've talked a lot about that. Companies, there's obviously people in control. Bitcoin, there's no one in control. So Bitcoin, like, my opinion would be the least riskiest asset that you could buy. Like
of crypto or full
of anything.
Wow.
Yeah. I think overall, but because of exactly what you just said, there is potentially more upside at the moment in MicroStrategy in a short-term span, because people will see it as a normal financial institution. It's going to be in the S&P 500 pretty soon. It's already made like the NASDAQ 100 or whatever it's called. So, like, there's going to be people that see that and that just want to jump in on MicroStrategy rather than buying Bitcoin directly. And there's going to be a lot of people, even, I think of like older people, retirees using superannuation, like pension funds, all these sorts of things, probably easier to buy MicroStrategy than try it. Like, and then banks don't stop you from putting your money in the share market, but they do stop you from putting it on a crypto exchange. Like, they're actively stopping you. So there's all these barriers where people are trying to like block Bitcoin a little bit, and then also where just understanding it's just that little bit easier for some people in society to be like, I'm just going to buy MicroStrategy. So it's a really good question. I wish I knew the answer 100%, but there's all these little layers where it's like, like for some people, definitely it is going to be a smarter decision to just buy MicroStrategy. I don't have to worry about my passcode or my passkey or like, all those sorts of things, and they just hold it. But I'd only do that if I had done some work into Michael Saylor, done some work into MicroStrategy, and I trusted that he wasn't going to sell. Which I do personally. Like I mean, he's been on and said, like, basically when he dies, he's just going to leave his 500,000 Bitcoin to the Bitcoiners, in terms of like
to mine.
No.
Oh, what do you mean?
They're just gone.
Oh.
It's just less supply.
Right.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not passing, I'm not married, I haven't got kids. He's like, when I go, my Bitcoin's coming with me. Like, no one else is getting it.
Wow.
So that's his.
Just me a hacker's treasure trove.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, you wouldn't have seen it, but it literally, like, to hack. I mean, I don't know, to hack the Bitcoin network and get his Bitcoin.
I mean, I don't know anything about hacking. I'm sure it's hard.
Well, it's like, it'd be like, you'd need more power than the whole world generates almost to do it. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, even that, I was looking up, we talk about mining Bitcoin. And I was like, what the heck? Like, mining Bitcoin?
Someone else asked me that.
I was like looking it up, and I was like, all right, it just seems you need like a lot of power. That's all that's all I've managed to figure out. And some pretty hefty, devices that can sort out maths equations quickly.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
One other thing that I was interested about, sort of this, and you mentioned it, I think maybe on a previous podcast, about this idea of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And I think the more we talk about it, and even, this podcast is a bit of proof of that, we're friends. I know you start talking about Bitcoin and how it's doing all these things, how it's very bullish. People are getting in on it. And the idea of, at what point are we educating, just the general public on, when to buy and what amounts are safe to buy for your own financial planning portfolio, whatever, you might say, hey, it's smart to do 10%, but I think people get in thinking, I need to catch up because I haven't got in. And it's that whole idea of, it's gaining momentum, I should buy some now, whether or not they're in a position to actually buy as much as they do. And then you kind of get that early selling because they realize, I put too much in, it's dropped now, cost of living goes up, I actually need that money out. And so I'm just wondering how many people are, realistically doing that and are going to get swept up in this wave of, I don't want to miss out. I'm curious because I think a lot of people will buy, whether this year and the coming years, particularly as it rises, thinking, I don't want to miss out. But I think they could end up shooting themselves in the foot if they're not in a position where they've set aside money that, they're willing to be without for, like you said, 4 years or beyond.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, really good point. Yeah, I always say like, not only this podcast, but first of all, like do your own research with it. Like that's such an important thing to be like, hey, do I understand it? And one of the main reasons I say that is not only so that like, Josh was wrong, but so that when it does have these corrections, like these I spoke about in the news, like 109 all-time high, had the correction to 75, very normal historically. If people haven't done the research where they're like, oh no, I understand Bitcoin and I understand what happens with it, and like it is something that I want to have as part of my assets, as part of my investments. If people haven't got that conviction and haven't done some of that research themselves, then when it drops, they will sell.
Yeah.
They just will. So that's why I always say like, and like try and encourage with like the 4 year is really the short term hold. Like that's the shortest hold you should really do, because then like you're not worried about checking the price every day. If my mindset is like, hey, I know I'm holding this thing for at least 4 years, and then I check the price and it's like it's dropped $20,000 in 2 weeks. Yeah, that sucks, but I know in the back of my mind, I'm not doing anything with it for 4 years anyway. Like I've already made that decision. I've already done the research and the work where I know that. So that this short-term price fluctuation is fine, because historically I can have a look over every 4 years and it's beaten every other single thing, right? Like property, gold, oil, you name it. It's beaten it from 2009 to 2025. It's beaten everything. So if I have that conviction, I understand that short-term price doesn't have to affect my like day-to-day decisions, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's good.
it's interesting. Mate, thank you so much for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure. Had a ball.
Yeah, thanks.
I hope soon I'll get a message from you saying bought some more Bitcoin. I convinced the wife to we'll just get a little bit. Thanks heaps, mate. It's been a pleasure. We hope you can jump on with us next time. Like, subscribe, give Mike some love, leave us a comment. Thanks for the messages as well. It's been good fun. Australia votes tomorrow.
Already voted.
Yeah. You've already voted? Yeah, nice. Hopefully you voted
for these libertarians.
Well, we'll find out what happens with a lot of things on our next episode. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching the Bitcoin Brothers Australia. Thanks, mate.
No worries.